Welcome, and settle in. Let your breathing grow slower, more gentle, more even. Tonight, we'll walk together not through victory parades or halls of power but through mud, silence, and cold. Through one of the grimmest, most misunderstood experiences in modern history. A place where time slowed, where the ground swallowed boots and hope alike, and where men waited endlessly for orders that came too soon. We're going to the trenches of the First World War. But don't worry, this journey isn't meant to startle or stir. Quite the opposite. It's a quiet reflection on the long, weary rhythms of war. It's about the small things, the scrape of tin mugs, the whispers before dawn, the letters home tucked beneath a coat. This is the Great War, as lived not by generals, but by ordinary soldiers. Those whose names were never in newspapers, whose medals if any were tucked in drawers, and whose sleep, then as now, was fragile. So close your eyes if you wish. Imagine the distant rumble of thunder not from clouds, but from artillery, and picture yourself not as a spectator, but as someone there, a soldier, in the mud, in the weight. Let us begin with what it meant to survive even a single day. You're awake before the sky has even begun to lighten. The chill in the air has made its way through your uniform. Your overcoat, once heavy with woolies, now heavier still with moisture, collected from the fog that always clings to these narrow wooden walls. The trench is still. For a few quiet moments, you can almost pretend it's just another cold morning, but then the smells return, the sharpness of gun oil, the damp rot of old sandbags, the ever-present scent of wet earth and unwashed bodies. There's a sourness to it, subtle but inescapable. Your feet ache before you even try to move them. They've been soaking in half-frozen sludge for hours. You try to shift slightly to avoid a deeper puddle, but there's nowhere dry, nowhere clean. Just mud, dark and thick, packed between the duck boards and swallowing anything you drop. You reach for your tin mug. The tea is cold, but still, you drink. The morning routine is quiet. Boots laced as best they can be. Rifles checked and wiped down. A glance to the parapet just enough to confirm the day is still gray, and that nothing stirs on the other side of no man's land. Breakfast arrives in the form of hard biscuits, a lump of bully beef, and sometimes a smear of jamif supplies allowed. The biscuits are so dry, some men soak them in tea just to keep from breaking teeth. You eat slowly, not because it's good but because it gives you something to do. Then, you wait. Waiting is the real enemy in the trenches. It stretches minutes into hours, days into weeks. You wait for mail, you wait for rations, you wait for sleep that doesn't come easily, but mostly, you wait for orders. The dugout offers little comfort. It's cramped, built into the side of the trench wall, reinforced with timber and sandbags. In the winter, it drips. In the summer, there's usually a thin blanket and a candle stub. If you're lucky, dry socks. If not, trench foot becomes a slow certainty. Occasionally, someone tells a joke. It's usually dark, but laughter, no matter how brittle, feels like resistance. At night, things shift. The trench becomes even more alive with small movements. Sentries rotate in and out. A runner moves between sections. Occasionally, the sharp clink of a shovel echoes as someone repairs a collapsed wall or digs out a latrine. And then, the rats come. They're not afraid. They know this place as well as you do. Big ones. Some say the size of cats. They scurry across your blanket, steal crumbs. Sometimes, bite. They're drawn to food but also to something else. Something no one talks about at length. There are corners of the trench that are never dry, never clean, and never empty. You don't speak of the fallen aloud. There isn't always time to bury properly. And when shells come random, roaring, and cruel, they leave behind reminders that this isn't just a place of it's a place of loss. But even that becomes part of the routine. You learn to step around things, not just puddles and rat spot memories. You write letters in pencil on thin, creased paper. You ask for cigarettes. You ask about your sister. You mention the weather. You don't describe the lice, the smell, the ache. There's no point. The officers walk through now and then. Some nod, some don't. Some were in the same mud just a few years ago. Others aren't much older than you. A shell lands in the distance. No one ducks. You've learned to read the sound when it's close, when it's far, when it's for you. You sleep in short stretches, boots on, rifle nearby. Sometimes you dream. More often, you don't. But the real terror comes not from shelling, or frostbite, or rats. It comes from that whistle, the one that means over the top. You don't think about it until you hear it, but when it comes, everything stops. You climb the ladder, you leave the trench. You run forward into smoke, wire, and fire. And if you survive, you return, you sit, you eat, you sleep. A pause in the madness that almost felt human. Let the cold settle in around you. Let the pace slow, as it did for thousands of men one quiet December evening. Over a century ago, it was the first winter of the Great War. The trenches were new, then raw earth, poorly dug, barely reinforced. The war had begun with speed and fire, but by December, it had settled into something more stagnant. Something colder, something quieter, at least for a moment. Along sections of the Western Front, particularly in Flanders British, and German troops found themselves in close proximity. In some places, the distance between trenches was no more than a stone's throw. Too close for comfort, and yet just far enough for something unexpected to unfold. The air was bitter, the ground was hard, and it was nearly Christmas Eve. Now imagine yourself in one of those trenches. You're exhausted, numb. Your boots haven't dried in weeks. Your fingers are chapped and stiff, and the sky above is a dull gunmetal gray. You expect nothing more than the usual distant shots, miserable stew, and the long, anxious wait for dawn. But then, just after dusk, something unusual begins. From the German trench, across no man's land, a sound carries on the wind. Singing, not loud, not boastful. A gentle chorus. Still not. Silent night. Holy night. You and your mates pause. You exchange glances. Some chuckle softly. One or two hum along, almost involuntarily. And then without really thinking, someone in your trench responds. The tune is familiar, the words different, but the meaning, somehow, the same. Before long, candles appear on the German parapet. Tiny flickers in the dark. Christmas trees, crudely decorated, rise above the trench edge. Someone dares to peek over. And then, the most unthinkable thing of all happens. A man climbs out, unarmed, standing tall in the open, a German soldier, wave in one hand, his other held high. No gun, no helmet, just gesture. Caution and courage mingled. He is not shot. Slowly, hesitantly, others follow. British and German soldiers meeting in the middle. No man's land becomes, for one night, everyman's land. They shake hands, they swap buttons and cigarettes. They show each other photos of sweethearts and mothers. Some share food, chocolate, sausages, tinned meat. A few even exchange addresses. There are stories of a football match, though history remains unclear on the details. Whether it happened formally or just as a few joyful kicks between boots, it doesn't matter. What matters is that, for the briefest of moments, the war stopped itself, and no one ordered it. The officers didn't plan it, High Command didn't approve it. In fact, they would later work hard to prevent it from happening again. But for that night, Christmas Eve, 1914 men on both sides remembered what it was to be human first and soldier second. They buried their they sang they stood under the same stars on the same frozen earth and wondered how they had come to this place and how long they'd remain in it. The truce didn't last long. By the next day, in many sectors, the guns resumed. A few commanders had forbidden fraternization. In some areas, soldiers were punished for laying down arms, even briefly. And soon, the war returned to its familiar rhythm of fear, silence, and shells. But the Christmas truce lived on in the memories of those who experienced it. Years later, some veterans would recall it with a distant warmth, like a dream that briefly stepped into the cold reality of war. Others found it too painful to remember, the contrast too sharp. But historians would come to see it for what it was. Not a miracle, not a legend, but a quiet truth, that even in the darkest places, kindness can still find its way through barbed wire and bitter frost. And so we move now from this rare moment of peace to the stories that rarely made headlines, to those who survived the war, but not without scars. Medical mysteries and mental scars. The guns fall silent in your mind for a moment, but your body still flinches. Your hands tremble, your chest is tight. You hear no explosions, but you're still not at peace. This is shell shock. In 1914, the term didn't exist. There was no name for what happened when a soldier's mind refused to carry on. No understanding of what shattered a man who hadn't been wounded. No language for invisible wounds. By the war's end in 1980, more than 80,000 British soldiers alone had been officially diagnosed with what would come to be known as shell shock. Many more were never counted. They were misunderstood, mislabeled, or quietly sent away. Let us imagine, for a moment, a soldier named Thomas. He has survived the front. His uniform is intact. His eyes are clear, but at night, he wakes screaming. During the day, he cannot speak. He jumps at every sudden sound. His hands twitch. His body jerks. His memories come in fragments, when they come at all. At first, doctors believed shell shock was caused by the physical blast of an explosion. The name implies this, that the brain was shaken, dislodged, disturbed, and in some cases, perhaps it was. But soon, men began to appear with symptoms who had never been near an artillery strike. Men who had worked in supply units. Clerks, medics, messengers. It became clear this wasn't about proximity, it was about exposure, to fear, to trauma, to death. Not once or twice, but daily. And so shell shock was a mystery. And because it was misunderstood, it was also mishandled. Some doctors were sympathetic. They prescribed rest, talk, gentle observation. There were hospitals with gardens, books, music places that tried to treat the whole person, not just the symptom. But others saw weakness. They believed the condition was moral, not medical. And so patients were subjected to electric shocks to the legs, icy baths, isolation. Some were accused of cowardice, malingering. Others were sent to asylums, tucked away where no one would ask too many questions. And perhaps most tragically, some of those suffering shell shock were executed, shot at dawn for abandoning their posts or refusing to return to the front. Their condition wasn't recognized as illness. Their fear was treated as failure. It wouldn't be until years later, decades, even that the psychological toll of combat began to be understood with any real clarity. The term post-traumatic stress disorder wouldn't enter medical language until the late 20th century, but even now, the memory of those early, forgotten sufferers remains. Shell shock didn't just affect soldiers during the war. It followed them home. In quiet villages, men would stand by windows and watch for threats that never came. Some wandered fields. Others couldn't return to work. Many never spoke of what they'd seen or what they had felt in those long, silent nights. The scars were deep and silent, and too often left untreated. Yet even here, there were those who tried to help. A few pioneering doctors, like WHR Riversay neurologists and anthropologists, believed in listening, in understanding, and in patience. He treated soldiers like the poet Siegfried Sassoon, encouraging conversation over coercion. He believed that healing came from acknowledgement, not punishment. It was a beginning. Today, we know more, but that knowledge was paid for in pain, confusion, and the lives of those who could not explain what they felt, only that it would not stop. So tonight, we pause to remember them. Not the decorated, not the triumphant, but those who returned broken and were too often abandoned by the world they fought to protect. As the fog of memory lifts, let us walk onward past the dugouts and field hospitals to a different world entirely. One of polished boots and tailored coats, of polished silver and quiet maps. Let us now visit the officers' war. Champagne, maps, and men as numbers. Now, take a moment to shift perspective. The trench is behind you. The rats, the mud, the midnight shilling left in the past. You now stand in a stone villa, perhaps once owned by a French nobleman. The kind of building with tall windows and creaking wooden floors. A fireplace flickers. The air smells faintly of pipe smoke and wax. This is not the front. This is the rear echelon, where the officers and planners reside. You hear footsteps measured, steady echoing, in well-shined boots. Voices speak in clipped tones, trading updates, confirming logistics. Men in neat uniforms lean over a table, not of food, but of maps. Large ones, rolled out across a walnut surface. Pins mark locations. Thin red lines curve around rivers and hills. The shape of the war as seen from above. This is the high command. War here is abstract. It is measured in terms of positions gained, units deployed, supplies dispatched. There are no cries here. No trench foot, no lice. The wine is bottled. The food arrives hot. The linens are clean. Officers of high rank had their own billets. Some stayed in well-kept chateaux. Others in requisitioned estates or secure field headquarters with wooden walls, dry beds, and servants. Their concerns were different. They worried about strategy, not sanitation, about morale, not mortality, about whether the next push would break the line or simply cost another 10,000 men. And yet, even they were not untouched. Some generals had served before. Some had seen the horror, if only briefly. But war at this level required distance and emotional buffer between decisions and consequences. Imagine one such man. He walks down a corridor, glancing at a bulletin, reports of trench conditions, supply needs, casualty, figures. The numbers blur together. Thousands here, dozens there. A few replacements requested. Later he meets with colleagues. They discuss terrain, weather, rumors of enemy reinforcement, all spoken in tones as dry as the paper they're printed on. He has not forgotten the war. He simply cannot feel all of it, not every day. To do so would be unbearable. And so, the men become numbers. This is not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. It is how strategy is made, how plans are drawn from a hilltop view, with charts, with radio codes, with schedules. Some high-ranking officers did visit the front lines. Briefly they donned helmets, peered into trenches, shook hands with commanders, but most did not stay. The noise, the filth, Instead, they returned to quarters where tea was served at 4 o'clock, where decisions were made by candlelight, not gunfire, where the war was discussed but not endured. This separation led to resentment. Frontline soldiers spoke bitterly of generals who never bled, of commanders who sent wave after wave over the top from the comfort of their leather chairs. Poets like Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon wrote scathing verses about the old lie, the idea that dying for one's country was glorious. But the truth, as always, is more nuanced. The men at high command did not live in luxury. Exactly. They carried the weight of failure, of losses, of orders that could not be reversed. They knew, somewhere deep, what each red line on the map might cost. And yet, it was different. Their nights were quieter, their coats drier, their war, while real, was filtered. It was not fought with a bayonet, but with a briefing. And as we drift away from their world now, from the clean boots, the lined paper, and the distant thunder, let us reflect one last time on the strange contradiction of war. That while some suffered with every breath, others planned over breakfast. That while some crouched in mud, others stood beside fireplaces. That a war, any war, is not one experience but thousands, some visible, some forgotten, silently, even into sleep. And so we end our quiet walk through a war that changed everything, from the stinking ditches and sleepless nights of trench life, to a brief moment of peace on Christmas Eve, to the minds shattered by fear and forgotten by medicine, to the warm rooms where maps decided fates. The First World War was not just battles and borders. It was moments long, silent, uncomfortable, moments lived by millions. It was a war of waiting, of quiet terror, of enduring, of becoming someone else by the time it ended. And now, dear listener, the cannons are quiet once more. The rats are gone. The boots are off. Let the past drift away like fog at dawn. Let the silence return, not in fear, but in comfort. You are safe. You are far from the front. And you may finally, softly, rest. Good night.